There's been a huge UN controversy. An Israeli official from the government ascended the Temple Mount. Is it a sign Temple Mount sacrifices are about to begin? As you likely know, Israel has a new Netanyahu government that's far right. And in one of its first acts, its Minister of Internal Security, Ben-Gvir, went to the Temple Mount. Immediately, international chaos erupted, and in response, a UN Security Council meeting was held, condemning Israel and Ben-Gvir. Okay, you might say, but why is this a problem? The man, a government official no less, went to a holy site in his own country, Israel, and the UN Security Council of all people condemned him? We probably need to talk about this, but first a shout out to Fisherman, a member of our advisory board, who has been carefully watching Ben-Gvir and the events ever since he was appointed Minister of Internal Security. Now this guy Ben-Gvir timed it so that when he went to the Temple Mount, it was very early in the morning when there weren't many people, and so there was no controversy on the mount itself associated with him going there. He was up on the Temple Mount for only 15 minutes. He didn't pray. While he was there were no apparent problems until he came down, and the uproar that arose in the Middle East with other nations and with the UN. And that is why we're doing this video today. I think something has changed spiritually in regard to the Temple Mount now that Netanyahu is back in charge and this man Ben-Gvir has gone up to the Temple Mount, and this may portend some major end-time events happening this year. That's right, we think things might actually happen this year. We're not sure, but we think they might, especially the possibility of sacrifices beginning again on the Temple Mount. But why are these sacrifices important? Let's start at the beginning. If you have followed this channel for any length of time, you are aware that a number of prophecies center around events on the Temple Mount. We know from Daniel 9:27 that at the midpoint of the tribulation or 70th week of Daniel, the daily sacrifices on the Temple Mount will be taken away by the Antichrist. And we know from Daniel 11:30 that it is the army of the Antichrist who does this. This is part of the event known as the abomination of desolation. And right after this event, we know from Matthew 24:21 that the Great Tribulation will begin. What is interesting about these prophecies, of course, is that there haven't been sacrifices on the Mount for almost 2,000 years. They were discontinued in 70 AD and never resumed. So, for the end times to happen, the daily sacrifices of a lamb in the morning and one in the evening must begin again in order for them to be taken away. This beginning of sacrifices is one of the major signs of the end times. Another prophecy about this exact time period is mentioned in Revelation 11:1-2. Then there was given to me a measuring rod like a staff, and someone said, "Get up and measure the temple of God and the altar, and those who worship in it. Leave out the court, which is outside the temple, and do not measure it, for it has been given to the nations or Gentiles, and they will tread underfoot the holy city for 42 months. This time period of 42 months is approximately the time of the Great Tribulation. So this passage is referring to events happening around the same time as the abomination of desolation. The time the city of Jerusalem will be trampled by the Gentiles. In other words, Gentile nations will invade Israel and defile the city for that length of time. Jesus calls this the times of the Gentiles in Luke 21. But also notice that only the outer courts are given to the Gentiles. The temple and the altar appear to remain in Jewish hands. But the sacrifices, of course, will be ended. So the Temple Mount appears to be divided at that time. These are things that the Scripture tells us. And what Scripture tells us is where things are headed. But where did this all begin? In the 1967 war, Israel defeated a coalition of Arab nations and won back the city of Jerusalem and the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount belongs to Israel right now, so why would the Security Council condemn this man Ben-Gvir? In 1967, after the Israelis captured Jerusalem, Moshe Dayan, the defense minister at that point, thought that the nations of the world would better respect Israel as a nation and allow it to remain if they demonstrated that they would be respectful of other peoples too. So he graciously contacted the Muslim religious authorities and said they could be in charge of operations on the Temple Mount. However, things did not work out the way the Israeli government planned. Since that day, the Muslim Waqf, who controls the Temple Mount, permits only groups of Israelis onto the Temple Mount. The rules are that if Jews want to go up on the Temple Mount, they have to be escorted there by police. They're absolutely prohibited from praying or doing anything that could be constituted as an exercise of their faith. Even mumbling under their breath is considered violation because they are saying, well, they must be praying if they're mumbling under their breath. Ben-Gvir believes that this is a form of racism, and that is why he went up to the Mount, because he wants to stop racism against the Jews and allow free religious practices there. He wants to overcome the status quo, the way that things have been. Now, what makes this interesting is Ben-Gvir's position. Prior to the election, the police reported directly to the police commissioner, not to the government. After this election, they now report to Ben-Gvir. The Arabs rightly understand that only the police can enforce the laws the Muslims have limiting Jewish activity on the Mount. This makes Ben-Gvir, in particular, a dangerous man to the Muslim eyes, since he can stop police from enforcing the status quo. Technically, he can allow the sacrifices to begin, at least from a police enforcement standpoint. And it makes him dangerous in the eyes of the United Nations, who condemned Ben-Gvir and Israel for this action. They said Israel was to maintain, quote, the status quo. In other words, nothing was to change. No praying, no one going up on the Mount except in escorted groups, etc. And certainly no sacrifices. Even though the Mount is in Israeli territory, to keep the peace, the UN wants nothing to change. Well, where does this put the issue of Temple Mount sacrifices? It means they are closer to that event now that Ben-Gvir is breaking the inertia of that status quo. Events are now in motion. What are those events that we believe are necessary to take it from where we are now to get the sacrifices started? From an Israeli point of view, they would like to have two things happen. They desire the sacrifice of a red heifer to produce ashes, which they believe will make their priests sanctified enough to do the sacrifices on the Temple Mount. Second, they would like their false Jewish Messiah to be revealed first in order to do the red heifer sacrifice and to command them to begin sacrifices on the Temple Mount again. These are the two things Israel is waiting for. From a Muslim perspective, they would like to get something of value in exchange for the Jews beginning sacrifices on the Mount. They would like to create a Palestinian state. They would like to divide the land of Israel and create a two-state solution. All these things could potentially happen by the end of 2023. We have announced many times that 2023 is a year of the Messiah in Israel, that only 1 year in 7 is such a year when they believe, not true, but when they believe their Messiah can be revealed. And we know Jewish rabbis have said they're already in conversation with someone that claims he is their Messiah. Additionally, there are 5 perfect red heifer cows in Israel right now who will be mature enough to be sacrificed in the fall of this year. The pieces are in place for Israel's needs to be met by this fall. What about the Arabs? Prince Mohammed bin Salman has been negotiating a dividing of a land behind closed doors for some time with Israel and Jordan. Just like dominoes, all 3 pieces of the puzzle could fall into place in a matter of months by the end of 2023. We are not saying they will, but it is entirely possible. And if such an agreement is reached, trading land for the right to perform sacrifices, the Temple Institute in Israel is already ready to begin sacrifices immediately by rolling a mobile altar onto the Temple Mount. Now, will such an agreement be the covenant with the many spoken of in Daniel 9:27? If this happens, it could be one aspect, an earthly aspect of that covenant. Time is going to tell. But all these future things are being set in motion by Ben-Gvir setting foot on the Temple Mount and breaking the status quo. That is why the UN Security Council was so enraged. These are the things Christians should be watchful for right now. And as we watch, we need to be doing something. to awaken our fellow churchgoers that this is happening, because the vast majority are doing nothing. They are dozing, they're sleeping regarding to how close we might be to the return of Jesus. If you want to do something but don't know what to do, click right here to learn what this ministry is doing and how you can join this effort to prepare the way for Jesus. Till then, this is Nelson, and I'll see you there.